You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network. This is the ThunderQuack Podcast, the official podcast of ThunderQuack Podcast Network, where anything can happen. So strap yourselves in and hold on to your butts. It's ThunderQuack time!
Hello and welcome back to the ThunderQuack Podcast, the official podcast of ThunderQuack.com. You can get it early every Tuesday on patreon.com/ThunderQuack, or you can wait and get it late every Friday on podcast services across the galaxy. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen.
And I'm your other host, Amanda Conkin.
And this episode is sponsored. This is our first episode where I'll actually say that at the beginning. But you've heard one ad already at the beginning, and we'll have a couple more ads in the middle, but we'll do that later. But the podcast is now ad supported. We've made a move, and we're going to be moving all of the ThunderQuack podcasts from our previous hosting service over to a new one, where we'll be able to, with the sort of the collective numbers of ThunderQuack, be ad supported.
Take over the universe.
And that means a couple of things. It means that we're going to be able to do a bunch of cool stuff because we'll have money to spend, not just the Patreon money, which has kept us running and expanding slowly over the last few years. So
I really want a microphone. That's the biggest thing that I'm excited
your
for.
own microphone.
So that I can podcast from home,
Yeah.
which means I'll be happy every time I podcast because I won't have had to come all the way to Quillam every time we podcast.
So we'll be able to buy new equipment and pay for things like we're going to Star Wars Celebration later this year, and we'll be able to buy new equipment like road equipment for that. We'll be able to
do some on the road episodes, some live streams.
Yeah, so it's just going to give us more opportunities, and as we go into 2020, the beginning of a new decade, and our 5th year as ThunderQuack, it just gives us way more flexibility, because there was always revenue coming in from Patreon, which we've been hugely grateful for, but it's money in, money out, and over the last few years, we've been really lucky that we've always managed to cover costs and not go over, and basically since we launched ThunderQuack, that's been the case, which is really cool. But this is going to give us the ability to actually start banking some money to do other cool stuff with.
And is Patreon still unadded?
So that's the thing.
Yeah.
So that's one of the other changes, is that we will have some new tiers. So the $1 tier is going to be the ad-free version of the podcast. Mm-hmm. And then the $5 tier will be getting it early. And then the $10 tier will be ThunderQuack Uncut. So that's going to be the new setup. And then $20 will be the Patreon producer one. So $20 you'll get a shout out on the podcast.
Yay.
Yeah.
And I will say, $1 is worth the no ads.
Yeah, I would say so.
Sounds
I would say so.
And you get to be part of our Facebook group that way.
Yep. Well, yeah,
So,
and with all of them,
the other perks.
you're a part of the Facebook
So
group.
become a part of the ThunderQuack podcast community.
Yeah. So other than that, I mean, the podcast now, we're unfettered. We're not beholden to anything. Even when we did our run last summer as sort of an introduction to what ThunderQuack was going to be once Quiver ended, we decided that we were going to go through and we were going to rank and review all of the Star Wars Skywalker saga films. But right now, we're not going to do that.
We get to do whatever we want.
We're just going to talk about whatever we want.
It's so great. And we did on that uncut, let me tell you.
Yeah. We're talking about some, at the end of this episode, you will hear some interesting conversation. It goes into some weird places.
Debatable. But
I didn't say entertaining. I just said interesting.
Interesting. Oh, that's fair.
But
Way to sell it, Amanda. I'm so good at selling things. Yeah. Listen to us, please.
We're going to review 2 movies. I'm going to give a very, very spoiler-free recommendation to go see the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. And then we're going to talk about Birds of Prey.
Woohoo!
But is there any like geeky news?
I haven't watched Altered Carbon yet.
Well, it hasn't started yet.
Okay, that would explain why I haven't watched Altered Carbon yet. Yeah. The Stranger Things trailer.
Friday. Yeah, there's this
Stranger Things trailer that's out.
Teaser.
Where I forgot that Hopper died in season 3. So that was a thing.
Spoilers for season 3.
Sorry.
No, you've had like almost a year. Really cool. Just a really cool tease. Just like this like Russian gulag sort of thing. All these guys like breaking rocks in Russia, so. and then the reveal of Hopper, which is very exciting. I mean, like, I think that we all knew after the way that season 3 ended that obviously
because he just like disappeared, right?
Yeah. So everybody that got zapped by the thing, like all the evil Russian soldiers and whatever that had gotten zapped by the thing as it was overloading, disintegrated.
Oh, right.
So the shot where he disappeared, like we just see like the ash falling, and like Joyce sees the ash falling and assumes that he died. Right. So we all just assume that he died. Right.
But if you didn't see it on camera, it didn't happen. Whenever it comes to heroes,
no body, no death. Right. So. Heroes and villains. Villains more so.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah. Hence why Palpatine was able to come back in Rise of Skywalker.
Okay. So I've been thinking about this.
We're not going to get into that too much. Okay. Go ahead.
No, I have started to get mad at J.J. Abrams recently.
Okay.
Because how unfair to like undo The Last Jedi. Because I've been thinking basically about how we have to rank Rise of Skywalker now. Like once it comes out, and don't get me wrong. I enjoyed Rise of Skywalker. Yep. I had fun. It was everything I wanted. But, like, couldn't they have told a similar story without it being Palpatine? Like, why did it have to be her being... Okay, spoiler for Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, I think everybody who cares has seen it.
But, like, it's just
what podcast you're listening to. So
it's a way less interesting choice to make her, like, a descendant of Palpatine.
Yeah.
Like, it's so much more interesting if she is nobody. Like, it just...
Okay, we're going to get into all of this down the road.
When
the Blu-ray comes out, we're going to what we'll actually do is I think we're going to do like a watch along for Rise. So
what a good
because
idea.
We've got the setup.
Yeah.
So nice. It'll basically be a commentary.
I just saw your Jurassic Park T-Rex.
Oh yeah, the Lego T-Rex.
You got a lot of toys since I've been here last. Sorry, everybody.
No,
I'm like a kid in a candy store.
The only new thing in here, I think, is the T-Rex.
But also the bowling ball.
Well, the bowling ball is ancient. I've had that thing forever. That was in the old house.
Has it always been sitting right there?
It's been like bumming around.
Oh, maybe I just noticed it because of the bowling
today. Which is
today.
Appropriate because it is Big Lebowski. More on that in the uncut. But if you want to hear a conversation about bowling, I guess. Not about the Big Lebowski, which I don't know why... Of all the things, like to talk about the Big Lebowski collector's edition bowling ball that I have, and then to start talking about bowling instead of talking about one of the greatest movies ever made, I don't know, but whatever.
I've never seen the Big Lebowski.
Oh, man. Fill a space cruiser with all the movies you've never seen.
Yes.
Jeez Louise.
You could.
Great movies you've never seen, I should clarify. My thing with Rise of Skywalker and with Rey being a Palpatine and all of that is it cheapens Rey's character.
Yeah.
Because instead of her power coming from her, it comes out of Kylo Ren's mouth, and he's still Kylo Ren at that point. So there's a certain element of it where you can say, you can make the argument that, as with everything else that's come out of his mouth in the other two movies, he's a colossal misogynistic douchebag, right? Like just capital D, capital B douchebag, right there with the inner caps, because he says awful things in all three movies.
I've never thought of douchebag as two words. It really confused me for a second to be like, where are you getting the B from?
It is one word, but
no,
that's why I said it's an inner caps.
Yeah. That's good. I get it.
Because he deserves both.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I don't love the character of Kylo Ren. It just means that that's the purpose that he serves within the story.
Yeah.
So he literally says the words. It's like it's his power.
Yeah. No,
right.
Yeah.
You have his power,
and
it's like, no, Rey has her own power. That's not how the Force works, to quote Han Solo. And like that's kind of that was the point of a whole lot of Star Wars. And the only
the kid
saving
in The Last Jedi.
Yeah, the only saving grace that Rise has is like I said, you can justify that Kylo Ren just doesn't understand how the Force works. And that's probably the greatest thing that holds him back from conquering the galaxy, is that he thinks he understands it, but he's never in control of it. It's always in control of him. And then at the end, when all of the Jedi are talking to Rey, Kanan from Star Wars Rebels says a Jedi's strength, in the heart of a Jedi lies her strength. In the heart of the Jedi lies her strength. And that to me is amongst everything else that's said by the Jedi in that moment, that's Kanan specifically talking to Rey and saying, like, it's not him, it's you, and it's always been you, which is what all of them are kind of saying to her, right? Like Obi-Wan says,
oh, it's such a good movie.
Yeah, Obi-Wan says, Rey, these are your final steps, rise and take them. Like, that's very much about her agency and her decision to stand up to Palpatine and defeat him. And they all kind of say that. It's like Anakin says, restore the balance as I once did. Like, none of them are saying like, use his power to defeat him. They're all saying like, no, it's you. It has to come from you. Yeah. And all of the Jedi are in you, right? But to just even have a character in 2019 utter the words to a female protagonist, that's not the phenomenal cosmic power that you have doesn't belong to you. It belongs to a literal wrinkly old white dude. Is just so tone deaf and misguided, I think, to just even go there. And ultimately, like the problem is that they did that on purpose, because there were a lot of older white dudes who were upset that Rey was as powerful as she was in the previous movies. So they needed a justification. And I just think that what Ryan did was so progressive and moved the saga forward so much in saying, like, no, it can come from anywhere. Like, that's the whole purpose of, like, the Force midichlorian count, whatever. It's that's not what it's about. And so I really, like, I kind of hang everything on those words from Kanan, which it's no coincidence that I put a lot of stock in that, because Kanan is one of my top 3 Star Wars characters of all time, and Star Wars Rebels is my absolute favorite Star Wars content. It, from start to finish, I think is the strongest Star Wars story out of any of them. And Kanan is the biggest part of that for me. His journey is so quintessential to the story of the Jedi. It contains to me everything that is Anakin Skywalker, the fall of the Old Republic and the old Jedi Order, and as well as the new hope that is in Luke Skywalker and the next generation of Jedi. And he trains Ezra, and Ezra is very much in the same school of Jedi thought as Rey. And so I think he just really kind of encompasses everything that I like to see from a Jedi. he is a badass with a lightsaber, but he also knows when not to fight, which is a very Obi-Wan thing, right? Like he's kind of has the best of a lot of characters, and a little bit of Han Solo thrown in for good measure too. So those being his words, I probably imbue them with more meaning than the average viewer, but it's the only thing that gets me through that movie. I love the first 2/3 of it, but that third act just drives me up the wall, because you've got these three characters that you focused on for 2.5 movies, 2 and 2/3 movies at this point. And none of the three of them have a meaningful ending to their story. Yeah. It's like, I don't know what the hell Finn does. Like, I know, like mechanically what he does in the plot, but thematically, I don't know what that means for him. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah. And there was such a better direction to go with that, with the freeing the stormtroopers and whatnot, but which they don't do. And it's just such a weird thread that they put in the story and then just doesn't pay off.
Well, I hadn't even thought of that.
Poe Dameron, the greatest pilot we've ever seen in Star Wars. You put him in an X-Wing in the third act, and what does he do? He circles the battlefield and says, "We're losing." Yeah. In The Last Jedi, he takes on the Dreadnought by himself. Yeah. And he, like, that, the maneuver he does when the TIE fighters come out and they're following him, and he closes the wings and goes through
the thing, and then they
smash into it. Yeah. It's like, that's Poe Dameron is the greatest pilot in the history of Star Wars, because he does that same maneuver in Force Awakens when they blow the hole in the oscillator, and he goes through there. And then he flies perfectly in a circle around the inside of the oscillator and back out that little tiny hole, just big enough for an X-Wing. Like, he is so awesome. He does so many cool things in the other two movies. In the cockpit of an X-Wing, he finally gets back in the cockpit of an X-Wing after everything he goes through in The Last Jedi at the end of Rise. And what does he do? Nothing. He doesn't do a single cool thing. There are some cool starfighter moments in the end of the movie. He doesn't have any of them. And then his whole arc of like finding the light and becoming a leader, and then he becomes general, which is the destiny that Leia knew was always his. And what's the first thing he does? Oh, this is too much responsibility. I got to split this in half with my best buddy. And it's like, that's not, what did Finn do to earn that, other than being a hero of the Resistance, right? But a hero of the Resistance is not a leader of the Resistance. That was the point of his. Well, but I mean, Han does lead stuff.
I guess so.
If you pay attention in Empire Strikes Back, he's giving orders. He's command. What's his rank? I guess he's still just Captain Solo, but like, he doesn't talk to people in the Rebel base on Hoth like he's just a mercenary there. Like, he has a rank, and he's important.
That's fair.
And you know, he goes through a lot and comes out the other end. And he's leading a strike team, so it makes sense. But yeah, with Finn, it's like
Finn doesn't lead anything throughout the whole thing.
He can be a general, but I just think, like, I don't know, I just found that moment of like, no, Poe, you earned this. Like, you don't need to split this with your friend. Anyways, we could talk about Rise of Skywalker all night, but that's not what we're going to talk about. I'm going to cut myself off there. Like,
good.
And we'll get into.
I'm sorry that I got us talking about Rise of Skywalker.
We'll
talk about it later.
I do like the movie. That's the problem. Yeah. That's the problem, is that I enjoy watching it, but
I want to watch it again.
It also
the two lightsabers and the it's so good. Okay, let's talk about Birds of Prey. Actually, you talk about your Sonic thing first, and then we'll talk about Birds of Prey.
I'll just say, if you have kids, then you have to go see Sonic the Hedgehog with them. It's one of the best family movies in the last 5 years. It's just a great. It's basically E.T. with Sonic the Hedgehog instead of an alien. Like, he's from another dimension, and he ends up stuck on Earth. and makes friends with James Marsden,
who is the best.
Yeah, who's the
I love
best.
James Marsden.
And Jim Carrey is the bad guy and chews the scenery like nobody else. And Neil McDonough, who played Damien Dark,
Damien Dark,
is in it, and he's in it for like 30 seconds. It's great.
Really?
Yeah, he's literally like
Interesting.
It's so great. There's a bunch of like military characters in it because it's like Sonic comes and he does a thing and this big EMP sort of thing. His speed burst goes out and knocks out the whole Pacific Northwest.
Interesting.
Electrical grid, right? And so you have this scene of like all of the military, like the I don't even know what you call it. Like when it, it's like the round table and it's like all of it's like the head of the Navy and the head of the Air Force and the head, like all of these guys, and it's all of the same actors. The only one they didn't have was Michael Ironsides. He was the only one that wasn't there, but it was everybody else you expect in any other action movie to be those guys in that room. Right. And then they're like, oh, like what are we gonna do? How are we gonna handle this? And the one guy, the leader of them, is like, we got to send him in. And they're like, no, not him. He's the worst. And they're talking about Robotnik. and they no, he's the only one who's smart enough to handle this. And they send him in. And Neil McDonough's character is there. And he's like the commander in the military, like the operation of like, they're trying to figure out what caused this thing. And Robotnik shows up and just just talks down to him and just is like, nope, zip it, get out of here. And then he's just not in the rest of the movie, which is just so great because it's Neil McDonough. And you're like, well, he's a great actor. He should be in the rest of this movie. He's not, though. Like, he never shows up again. And it's just so funny because he literally just like dismisses him and like he just like walks off screen and we just never see him again.
And then it just
so
like backs down to the chaos of Robotnik.
Yeah. So there's so much stuff like that in the movie that they knew who was going to be in that theater. They knew that it was going to be a lot of parents with their kids, and a lot of like the hardcore Sonic fans who are now adults, who've been fans since day one, like me. And I think that they serviced all audiences appropriately, which is so hard to do. And the best review that I've heard for this movie is that this is the best possible movie you could make
with the Sonic
adapting Sonic the Hedgehog into a film.
That's very good.
And I think that that's so accurate. Like that's the best way to put it. Because that's what it is. It's like, yeah, is there a better story that you could tell with Sonic? Yeah, but would that story, like, would that track with kids? Would that get everybody into the theater in the way that this movie did? I don't think so.
Interesting.
Because a full CG Sonic the Hedgehog movie would have been able to tell a better Sonic the Hedgehog story and not like this sort of cookie cutter story where you're just placing Sonic in as the character that comes from another world to befriend a goofy human, right? Like that we've seen that movie so many times, especially in the last few years with like Smurfs and like the Chipmunks and Garfield and all of these movies where you have your talking CG character and your humans. It's just like it's kind of been done to death, but they pull it off in a really great way because they rely on the source material to differentiate it.
Nice.
So they really lean into like the Sonic aspects of it.
Cool.
But they could have made a movie that was just like basically a video game cutscene, but like they did that with Ratchet and Clank, and nobody went and saw Ratchet and Clank. That movie did not perform. So I would
argue that's because the marketing of that movie. So
that was part of it. It was also not a great movie. And I am probably one of the biggest Ratchet and Clank fans that you'll find. I love those games. It's one of my favorite video game franchises, and that movie just falls flat. And I think like they just adapted the first video game into a movie instead of writing a good story, but that's a whole other thing. We don't need to talk about Ratchet and Clank, but
I spent so much of my time working on
Yeah. Yeah. It looked great.
Good.
The video game that came out to coincide with the movie was awesome because it was a remake of the original, and it was all like updated, and they added in like the story elements from the movie, and it worked really great in the game. In the actual movie, it like when you're not in control of those characters, it's just not as much fun. I don't know. It didn't move quick enough. There were kind of too many breaks in the action. It should have just been a little bit tighter, but yeah.
I'm very decidedly not commenting on this movie.
I know. I understand. Anyways, yeah. So Sonic the Hedgehog, I highly recommend it. I think that it's great. It's if you liked Detective Pikachu and sort of the vibe of that, I think that you probably enjoy Sonic because it is very similar of like the CG irreverent character quipping with a reluctant human sidekick who's also a little bit goofy and hapless. And then Jim Carrey as Robotnik is just such a dream casting choice. It's I think I said this to you that like I've been a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog since I was like, I don't know, like in the first grade. So what is that? That's like 6, right? Like when the first comic books came out, like 6 or 7 years old. And that's around the same time that Jim Carrey started his career with In Living Color, and I was a huge fan of In Living Color as a kid, and then obviously Ace Ventura and The Mask and everything that everybody else was in love with Jim Carrey. But like I idolized Jim Carrey for a long time, and him being Robotnik, like you're taking two of these things that like 8-year-old Mike was like obsessed with and putting them together. And he's so good in the role. And by the end of the movie, like he starts the movie as this sort of proto Robotnik character where he's weird and he's definitely insane, but he's not like single-minded, I need to roboticize the world and destroy Sonic the Hedgehog. By the end of the movie, he gets there, and his look transforms from Jim Carrey to Robotnik, and at like it's the first post-credit scene, and it's like it was in the trailer, so I'm not giving anything away, but you see that, and it's like the next movie is going to be even better than this one, because the next movie will just be straight up Sonic the Hedgehog. Robotnik's going to be trying to get revenge, and Sonic's gonna have to stop him. So yeah, go see it. Not that it needs help. It made $68 million this weekend with a budget of 84. Like that's pretty good. And that was just domestic. It's at like 111 the last time I checked worldwide, which means that they're making a sequel. There's no way they're not making a sequel because they set it up at the end of the movie. So
that's good.
Yeah, very exciting. Birds of Prey. You want to talk about Birds of Prey?
I sure do.
Before we do, let's take a break for ads. Okay, so we went on Tuesday night, and we went for cheapy night. We waited over the weekend, which I kind of regret because it didn't have a great opening, and I would have liked to have contributed our
Yeah, I realized that afterwards that I kind of like
$30.
I should have paid for it during the beginning.
Like pre-sale.
Yeah.
But so there's a funny thing. I saw a post from somebody who was like, this is the inherent misogyny and sexism of Hollywood. Ford versus Ferrari was $71 million. That was the budget for that movie, and it opened to 32 or something like that. Birds of Prey opened to 34, I think, and had a budget of like 70 point something. Like so it was a lower budget and technically made more, and yet Ford versus Ferrari was like, oh, it's a great start for this movie. It's only looking up from here sort of thing. And then the exact same outlet, I think it was maybe the Hollywood Reporter or something like that, basically said like, oh, Birds of Prey dead on arrival at 34 million. Right. And it's like that it's because it is a superhero movie, and it's female led, it's got two marks against it. right? And I would say because it is technically a sequel to Suicide Squad, whether the studio wants to acknowledge it that way or not, it is Margot Robbie playing Harley Quinn again. There are several references to Suicide Squad in the movie.
Yeah.
It's a sequel to Suicide Squad. Now we can move forward with each of these movies, and we can retcon whatever we want and recast the Joker or show him in a different light in this movie than we did in the previous one. I'm fine with that, but don't be disingenuous and say this isn't a sequel when it very clearly is a sequel, because it's very much the events of Suicide Squad directly influence the story of this movie. So but they want the narrative that this is its own thing, which I get, but I don't know. I don't know how you could have marketed this movie any differently than they did, but I think the biggest piece for me is that it's not a superhero movie.
Oh, yeah. And it's the thing.
It's an action movie and it's a comedy, but it's not a superhero movie.
And the thing that was the most interesting for me and that got me excited, there is literally one superhero in the movie, maybe, like with actual superpowers, and they're used once. Like,
yep.
So it's... But
I would argue that Harley has superpowers in this story.
I guess, yeah.
Because she's a different person when she comes out of the chemicals than when she went in. And she does beyond human martial arts in this movie. Like they push the envelope.
Oh, there is some awesome fights in this movie.
It's absolutely not a complaint. I think that they took the character of Harley Quinn and pushed her like to the nth degree, but she's on the level of like Deadpool.
So fun.
Where it's
so
like her
this is what people told me before I went to go see it. So if you haven't seen it yet, sorry that you're listening to this podcast, because probably we're going to spoil stuff.
We will, but we'll wait to do full spoilers.
But if you haven't seen it yet, people were saying that it was like the DC version of Deadpool. Yeah. And I kind of agree with that in terms of like tonally. It very much had that sort of, I didn't realize it was like rated as high as it was. Mm-hmm. It's like an R or something, isn't it? It's like pretty, it
must be. It would have to be.
Yeah, it's like an R-rated film.
They swear a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And
you only get one
F-bomb super violent, and it's super violent. Yeah. But it's so funny. Like, it's actually like quite funny and really kick-ass. Like, the ladies do amazing things in the movie. Like, it's entertaining as hell. I don't know, for me.
It is definitely one of those instances, and I hope that Warner Brothers and DC have I think the fact that they made this movie in the first place with the lack of critical and I think audience success, financially Suicide Squad did fine. It opened. It did good money. Fine. But from a critical and fan reception standpoint, it did not do well. It didn't leave a good taste in people's mouths.
But like all of my social circle, it left a really good taste in everybody's mouth. Like
Suicide Squad?
Oh, not Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
sorry,
no.
This movie.
Yeah, this movie. Yes. This movie is getting great reviews critically, and everybody who sees it says that it's great. But Suicide Squad did not do well with the audiences.
No, and people didn't like it.
And the critics hated it because it's, by all accounts, not a very good movie.
Yeah.
But so for Warner Brothers and DC to roll the dice on Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn again, I think shows that they have faith in her in that role, rightly so, because she's phenomenal in that role. Mm-hmm. But Margot Robbie's great in everything she's in, so it's not to take anything away from Harley Quinn, but like, Margot Robbie is just a great actress.
She's fun, yeah.
But I do think like they're not as interested in how much money it makes as long as it makes enough.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. The sequel to this movie is already in production and it comes out next year. So, like, because James Gunn's Suicide Squad has Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn in it. So,
right.
It's another movie called Suicide Squad a few years after the previous Suicide Squad movie. Like, DC has no idea what they're doing. Let's be clear on that. Like, they are absolutely just grasping at straws and doing their best to be relevant in a world that I think is just leaving them in the dust. But with that said, we got two DC movies coming out this year, Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman. And I will say, I mean, Black Widow is the other big superhero movie coming out this year. And then The Eternals is in November, but...
Did they really actually, though, rename the movie?
What?
Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey. Like, Birds of Prey. Like, there's this whole thing right now that it's actually getting rebranded, like, in the middle of its release to have a new name.
Because it's Birds of Prey and the
Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. Yeah. Which, when you watch it, it makes sense because that's, like, the tonally the way that the movie is, like, working.
Yeah. It is, so the movie, in a nutshell, is the origin story of the Birds of Prey in the DCEU, but their origin story is inside of a Harley Quinn centric story, which is such a great way to frame that and to introduce us to these characters. It's the exact opposite of everything else that DC has done, where they have tried to cram characters down our throats to get us to care about them. And that's why Justice League and Batman v Superman don't work, because they're just like, hey, care about Batman, care about Wonder Woman, care about the Flash, care about Aquaman. And it's like, whoa. Show us their stories, and then we will care about them, and then bring the team together. And with this, they go, oh, you care a lot about Harley Quinn. She's the only piece of Suicide Squad that anybody gave a damn about. So let's take her and use her as the vessel to introduce us to Black Canary, this version of Black Canary, to the Huntress, to Renee Montoya, and to Cassandra Cain. So we get introduced to these 4 other women in Gotham, and it's perfect. I don't know. This movie is I use, this is my trademarked perfect 10 rating system, which is, it's not out of 10. It's just that the movie is just a perfect 10. And I think that Birds of Prey is a perfect 10 movie. Like, there's not a frame out of place. There isn't a story beat where you're like, wait, what? Like, every element of the movie is there for a reason. And, like, that doesn't mean that everybody's going to love everything about it. I'm sure that there are some people who it's not going to be to their taste. But the movie respects itself, it respects its characters, it respects the audience that it wants to get, which is a very probably the most interesting part of the whole movie, is that, like, this is not, I don't think this is for general superhero audiences.
Oh, no.
Is why I say it's not a superhero movie.
No.
It is very much a postmodern feminist action movie that's female led, and because you could have a feminist movie that's not female led, but this is a woman centric story. Thanks, Siri. You're not part of this podcast. It's a woman centric story, and the men that are in it are they're there to support the stories of the women. Which is so fabulous. Such a flip. So Black Mask, Ewan McGregor, does he stand out in this movie? 110%. He is incredible. And I think it's like Margot Robbie's performance and then his performance right underneath it. Is it important that it's the Black Mask? Not in the least.
Yeah, no.
It could be any Gotham gangster, and that's why they picked the Black Mask, because Black Mask doesn't have a character. And you can go ahead and come at me on Twitter for that. Like, I don't care. I've read Batman comics. I know who the Black Mask is. He's a gangster who wears a black skull mask and shoots people. Like, that's his character in the comics. And different writers have done different takes on him, but I don't know that I've ever read a Black Mask that is this character. Like, I think it's wholly unique, and I think with good reason. Like, for a purpose. He is the antithesis of our heroes in this film, which are a bunch of badass women who don't need anybody to help them, but they support each other, which is great.
It's my favorite version of Ewan McGregor. So the character that he played, and also I really like Mr. Zaz. Is that what you say?
Just Zaz. It's just Zaz. Yeah.
Which is
he calls him Mr. Zaz.
But I think he's in my DC card game. Like, he's
Zaz.
He's
Zaz
like
is a character. So
character.
He has a scar on his body. He's like basically like marking the days, like with the hashes, right?
Yeah.
He does that on his body for every person that he's killed, and his body is covered in scars because he's a serial killer. So.
Anyways, but I also like that actor, right? The whatever his name is. Okay, I'm sorry that this is a terrible, like, I'm doing a terrible podcast thing where I keep referencing things in this room, but Mike keeps turning his hat backwards and forwards, and it was really weird. You had it like backwards, but you had it really low on your head.
Oh yeah.
And I'd never really seen you where I was gonna make this comment. I was like, "What are you doing wearing your hat backwards?" But then you had taken it off and pushed it back further, and I was like, "Oh, that's why." Because you usually just wear it like a lot further back, or you wear it facing front. But you had it sort of, anyways. People care about my Mike's been playing with this hat for the last little bit, and it's been like.
It's whenever I wear a hat for too long, my scalp starts to get itchy.
But that's probably why I probably always see you with it backwards up and off your forehead, and so that's why it was weird that it was just normal. Anyways, that's just the like a little behind the scenes magic here at ThunderQuack. But to get back to Ewan McGregor, one of my favorite just period people. I just like Ewan McGregor. But The Island is one of my favorite movies with him in it.
Yeah.
Like, if you haven't seen The Island, it's a good time.
It falls apart in the third act when it just becomes a ridiculous action movie, but the action's still pretty good.
But the action's good. And here's the thing. I didn't know who Michael Bay was at the time that I watched that movie. Like, I didn't realize it was a Michael Bay movie
until before Transformers.
Until many years later, when people said something Michael Bay, The Island, and I was like, wait, The Island is a Michael Bay movie? Because here's the thing, The Island, really confusing if you're not aware of like what it, like if you don't know that it's a sci-fi movie, you're gonna be real confused when you start watching it. So you really should go into The Island with zero context and just expect it to be like a good sci-fi time, because they didn't actually explain to you in the trailers like what the movie's about. And once you find out what the movie's about, it's great. But Ewan McGregor basically plays two different versions of himself in the movie, and the one that you meet halfway through is just this great sort of dense and like flighty and sort of, it's just this perfect character that I really like, was so much fun. And this version of Ewan McGregor in Birds of Prey, I think, was very close to that. And that character was has been one of my faves of Ewan McGregor's. So
Ewan McGregor is one of my favorite actors, not just because he's Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obviously that's a very big part of it, but he has the ability to play heroes and villains to the same degree.
Oh yeah.
And there aren't a lot of actors who can do that. Most people are going to be one or the other. Like Tom Cruise is a great example of somebody that I love, but he doesn't play villains very often. When he does, he plays a good villain, but it's usually much more esoteric than his heroes. Because his heroes are just straight up heroes. Like, I'm going to run faster and jump higher and
Tom Cruise in Tropic Thunder is one of my favorite Tom Cruises.
So his bad guys are not, he's never played like a supervillain.
Like a genuine,
I'm going to go ahead and put that out into the universe that he should be a bad guy in the MCU, because that is the only way I think to get him into the MCU.
Yeah.
But
I could see that.
He would be such a great Doctor Doom. But
he'd
just be so smarmy and douchey. It would be great. But Ewan McGregor has, like, he can play subtle as well as he can play arch, and that is another thing that not a lot of actors have, right? Like Robert De Niro is somebody who, like, I really love a subtle, understated Robert De Niro performance. I hate his arch performances. Although I love some of the movies that he does them in, like Meet the Fockers and what's the one with Billy Crystal where he's the mobster and
Analyze This
and Analyze That. Yeah. Like, I enjoy those movies. They're very funny, but you see Robert De Niro in those and it's like he's acting. I feel like he's acting silly right now. He's playing against type, and I'm taken out of the movie as a result. Ewan McGregor, when he does a silly character, which I would argue his Black Mask is very silly.
Oh yeah.
But it's in a very heightened, very arch, very silly movie, so it makes sense. You still believe that character, even though he is absolutely 100% maniacal, insane, and just bonkers off the wall with his behavior, you believe him as that character, and that's where the threat in this movie comes from.
Because he's actually is going to carry through, and he actually carries through with it, where you're like, it's in a weird, like, his reactions are so weird, and like the snot bubble thing, and where you just like, and then that's where his
let's get into spoilers now. So if you haven't seen Birds of Prey and you do want to go see it, I would say to stop listening now, come back later and finish this episode, because we're just going to talk about Birds of Prey for the rest of it, but we're going to get into spoilers. So the scene, my favorite scene with him in this movie is when Huntress first comes in and there's all the statues. They're looking at all the statues and they're all beautiful works of art, right? Like, it's all this great stuff. And then they get to the statue of him, and he like asks her opinion of it, and she says something about like who it's supposed to be, and he's like, no, that's me. And you see it, and it's awful. It doesn't look anything like him, and it's a terrible statue. Like, I feel like that was intentional, like that it.
Huntress, it's not Huntress. It's when Canary comes in.
Sorry, Canary.
Yeah. Okay,
sorry,
good. I was like, I got really scared. I was like, wait, did I miss something?
Sorry, Canary. Yeah, and it's just, it's this great bizarre moment where like he's surrounded by all of this amazing art, the masks, which obviously play into his character later, and these statues and stuff, and it's all so beautiful, and then you get to like the focal point of his collection, which is this ridiculous statue of himself, where you can kind of tell that they didn't put time in, like somebody made it and like an artist crafted it. So I'm not saying that like somebody didn't do it on purpose, but I feel that it's almost juvenile, like the rendering of his face, like where it's like it looks like a high school art project more than like a beautifully sculpted, because they could have just taken a face sculpt or like a face mold and like perfectly molded his face into this marble statue, right? Like it wouldn't have cost them any more or less than what they did. So I have to imagine it was a choice, because he looks at it with this like just reverence of like, this is my favorite piece. This is the most beautiful thing in my collection. And Canary looks at him like, okay. And like, he's just so insane. And then when you see it, all the times when he snaps and he starts to lose it, and you're just like, this guy is so dangerous. He's so scary, because I don't know what he's gonna do when he makes the woman stand. On the tail, like, and that scene goes on for so long, and it's so uncomfortable, and you hate every single second of it, because it's forcing you to confront that like there are men who have operated like this in our world, who do today, and they get away with it, and everybody's complicit because nobody stands up.
Everybody's just sitting around watching it happen
because
like,
he has power,
like,
and because he's dangerous, right? And it's such an important and like pressing metaphor in 2020 with the ridiculous human being that is currently the quote unquote leader of the free world. Like, I can't, like, it is so intentional. It is so obvious. The parallels between this version of Black Mask and Donald Trump are very obvious, but it's not just him. So it's not like there's never any like direct line, except for all of the very obvious things that are like, it's just speaking to men with money and influence and power and what they do with that money, influence, and power, and just kind of showing that it's a facade, like it's all fake, and they only maintain that power structure because everybody else is complicit in them having that power.
Well, and the thing that's really interesting to me, which is one of the things that I love about the fact that it's Kathy Yan, right?
That directed
it? Yeah.
I think so. That sounds right.
That you can tell that there's this woman at the helm of this film, because there's subtle things like the fact that the story starts out with Black Canary working for somebody who she knows is not a good person, right? And she's just kind of like, my bills it pays the bills. I show up. Like, she's part of that scene where the girl is on the table.
Yep.
Like, she is in that scene and is unable to do
anything. And we know
anything.
who she is. We know that she's Dinah Drake. We know that she's the Black Canary. She's referred to earlier in the movie as the Black Canary.
Yeah.
So we know she has powers.
Yeah.
We know that she has... We've already seen her beat the crap out of some guys. That's how she gets herself into the situation, sort of thing. So we know that she's powerful and that she could absolutely stop this from happening, and she does nothing.
And it's just a very interesting commentary on how women like fall into the roles that are like that the patriarchy exists not in the absence of women, but like that women can contribute in many ways to like these fundamental structures that shape our reality, and that they don't benefit from, that ultimately leads to like terrible things for them. And then finally making that choice, the only way she's able to make that choice to step away from that is because she has the support of other people doing it at the same time. Yeah. Like the fact that like all of these women together don't intend to be superheroes. They don't intend. They're all out for themselves. Every single one of them.
They all have totally selfish stories.
Totally separate stories. And the only reason they come together is because they realize that on their own, they're all going to die.
Yeah.
But if they band together, then maybe they can overcome this like.
And this is why it is a perfect 10 movie to me, and it's a fantastic film, and like triumphant, I think, despite whatever it does at the box office over its run. I don't care. I mean, I want it to do well. I care in that respect. But it is so incredible because these elements are self-evident without being preachy.
Yeah.
At no point does a character ever stop. So I just watched Marriage Story, right? And that movie at a certain point, have you watched it?
No, sorry.
At a certain point, and Laura Dern won the best actress in a supporting role, and deservedly so. She's amazing in the movie, and it's a great movie. But it stops at one point in the movie, and she has a monologue, which is the reason why she won the award. That it's a great monologue, and it's incredibly well written, and it's incredibly well performed, but the movie stops dead in its tracks for her to state the thesis of Scarlett Johansson's story. Right? About fair, like, and it's this speech that she makes about how like the idea of a good father was only invented in the last 30 years, and men, if they even do anything, they get applauded, and it's you're a hero. But women have been doing this since time began, and are vilified for it, basically. Like that's like the tone of the whole thing, and it's like this solid like 2-minute monologue that she does. And it breaks the fourth wall without breaking the fourth wall. Right. It's not Deadpool turning to the audience.
No, but it absolutely destroys the veritas of the film, because all of a sudden the movie isn't telling you the story of Scarlett Johansson's character. It is now telling you what the movie is about. Right. Rather, yeah.
Birds of Prey never does that.
Yeah.
But you come out of the movie understanding all of it.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's, to me, that is always, in my experience, like speaking for myself, that's the way to change hearts and minds. Not by getting up in front of somebody and telling them that the way that they think or feel is flawed, but by making them confront those feelings in a safe space.
Right.
Right. And in a movie, in a fantasy story, we talk about this all the time. In genre, it's so easy to get people's defenses down.
Yeah. And
force them to confront something that they don't want to confront about themselves. And this movie does that. It does that like 3 or 4 times with a bunch of different characters. And everything that you just said about these 5 women who come together to fight the patriarchy, basically.
Right, yeah.
It's such a great metaphor for the Me Too movement and how that happened, because it's exactly the same. Like, it's all these women who felt powerless, like they couldn't do anything for themselves, like they were stuck. And then the second that one stood up with the support of another and another and another and another, all of a sudden it snowballed into this movement where people were able to knowing that they had all these people behind them, call people out for behavior and start changing the conversation. And well, we obviously have so far to go, but I think like a movie like this being in the theater in the first place, and this tells you where Warner Brothers and DC are at with this movie and the Harley Quinn franchise. It has one writer.
Yeah.
And for a Hollywood blockbuster production in 2019, 2020, to have one writer
who's a woman,
that's ridiculous. How many writers were on Justice League?
Yeah.
Probably like 6.
Yeah. Like, they really just gave this movie space to exist.
Yeah.
And it just gives me so much hope for like, okay, and people always talk about it, and I mean, I'm always biased. I'm always going to be biased. But I'm a DC gal. I'm not a Marvel gal, and I've always said that. And this movie is one of the reasons why I'm kind of like so proud to be a DC girl, because it is like the first, I don't know, like giving Wonder Woman a female director, and then giving this a female director, and just letting them do their thing and just trust in the storytelling is so important. And I think when you put people in positions of power and you like allow them to have their own story and be creative, it just empowers people beyond what you see on the screen and beyond like what they can do. But it just shows that you're going to put faith in somebody, and it's not like this movie's bombing. This movie's going to make its money back. Like, it's not going to be a loss for DC. And the fact that it's certified fresh, I think, is a big deal too.
That's a big deal.
That it's like it's a good movie. Like, it's like objectively a very good movie. It's not going to like win awards or anything like that, but it's like, it's fun. And I will say, it's the most fun I've had at the movies in a really long time. To like go into it and be like, this is just enjoyable, and to see Harley Quinn just kick butt for like a whole section of the film where you're just like, oh, she's just hitting people with a baseball bat.
Yeah.
Like, it's great.
Oh, the moment, because she goes in with the mallet.
Yeah.
And this is, again, like, there are so many things in this movie, so many like little metaphorical things and subtext and nuance to the storytelling. But it's not subtext or nuance that you'll miss. It's all right there on the surface, but it's never stated. And there's a great moment where she goes in and she's got the mallet, and she's been using the mallet at the beginning of the movie, and then she, oh, you know what? I think I'm mixing it up with the animated series.
Maybe. She
switches to the bat in the animated series, and it's like, and she finds the bat in the movie. I watched them like at the same time, basically, within the same week. Yeah, no, it is in the Harley Quinn animated series. She has the mallet. She's broken up with Joker, and she's got the mallet. It's the same story. Like, it's a little bit frustrating telling the same story twice. But she's been using the mallet and wearing the costume and all that sort of stuff. She changes her costume, but she still uses the mallet, and she does okay against Joker's goons until she loses the mallet, and then she steals a bat from one of, like, she reverses the bat on one guy and then cracks a dude, like, I think in the knee or something. And then she like looks at the bat like, oh, because like the mallet was part of her Harlequin Joker thing. The identity that he gave her. The baseball bat is the new Harley Quinn, right? Like, that's Harley on her own as a solo character. It's the weapon that she uses in the Suicide Squad movie, right? So there's like, she has this relationship with a bat, and and that's in the movie as well, where it's like she finds it. I think they're in the lockup.
She finds it in the lockup, so she goes to rescue the Cassandra Cain.
Rescue, liberate,
steal.
She's bounty
one
hunting,
of the But when she finds like all of the things that she could, and she grabs the bat. But also, it's not just that she uses it and the fight is cool. It's that like they showcase the bat, like the fact where she throws it at somebody and it comes back around and she catches it. It's just so cool. Like,
Harley's bat is the same as Wolverine's claws or Batman's batarang. Like, it's like there are things about individual superheroes that are iconic, and they have managed to make a baseball bat, which is such a generic thug weapon, into this iconic element of Harley. Yeah, like the choreography in the movie is phenomenal. Like it's
so fun
at points like breathtaking, where you're like, that was one of the most fun action sequences I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
And that one specifically, when she first gets the bat, and because the tone changes, right? Like when she's got the gun, she's definitely kicking everybody's ass, but when she gets the bat in the lockup, like in the evidence locker at the end of that sequence, her motion changes. She just like, it goes from her being a badass and beating the crap out of everybody to like ballet, and it becomes like a dance where it's like she's one with this object that she's using to bust kneecaps and crush skulls, and it's horribly violent, but it's horrendously violent,
and I would say it's defensive.
Beautiful.
It's defensive to offensive. The moment she gets the bat, she starts to become in control, which I think is just really interesting. That it's like, because she was like trying to escape, or like the people opened the cages and they weren't supposed to, and so she's like having to fight her way out, but then she finally, when she finds the bat, she's like, oh, okay, now I can take some people down. And so it's just kind of a cool way to use that weapon, and to, I don't know, even just the whole concept of the movie itself is that like she literally is emancipating herself from the Joker, and like, I don't know, there's just a lot of really cool things.
It's not just it's not a gimmick at the beginning of like, hey, remember that last movie and how the Joker was a jerk and she broke up with him or whatever. It's like, no, it's part of her psyche in the story. It's a major, the Joker is a major character in this film without ever being in the film. He's only ever seen in the movie as a cartoon, as an illustration, and yet his presence is all over the film, I would say, from start to finish, because even in the final sequence when they go in and she opens the thing to get all the weapons, and it's very clear that like the Joker's cleared everything out, but then they look over and they open the trunk and it's all her stuff, because he's like, we're done. Like, so it's like, it was like, it's a breakup box, right? Here's all your crap. And they open it up and it's got some nice references and stuff to some throwbacks, but it's a great movie. I tweeted this after we saw it. I think it's the best DCEU film. I think it's one of the best DC movies.
I really like Wonder Woman.
I really like Wonder Woman as well, but I think Wonder Woman is very standard.
It's very standard popcorn, superhero,
right?
and kind of cliche, and
like,
whereas
it's
this one
very
is just
predictable.
fun.
You know,
and this
exactly
one is funner,
how it's
because I will say the only thing that really about Wonder Woman blows me away every time is the No Man's Land sequence, and I would say that like the action in this beats that for sure.
The Birds of Prey is a better movie, like a better constructed film than any of the other DCEU films by a long shot. And then in terms of like fan satisfaction of like going in and getting to see on screen the characters that we know from other media, I think it's the most satisfying one out of this group. So I don't know. I think that it kind of wins on all fronts. More people need to go see it.
They do.
But I also think it's not going to be for everybody.
No,
that's kind of the
true.
Other thing.
It's true.
It's particularly a lot of guys. I think a lot of guys are going to go to it, and the comments about if they want guys to that tweet, if they wanted guys to go see this, then they should put them in their sexy comic book costumes.
She's wearing
which are basically like just swimsuits,
super tight pants the whole time.
It's like
they look really good in the movie.
If you as a human being that is attracted to the female form are not blown away by some of the costumes in this movie, then you need to get your eyes checked. I don't know. Go to the doctor, because there's something wrong with you. Because like Black Canary in particular,
she looks good in the whole movie.
She is like smoking hot throughout this entire film. Every one of her costumes is sexy and powerful and awesome. But all of them are Harley and Huntress are also both very sexual, but it's we'll talk about this in other stuff, but it is the difference between the male gaze and the female gaze. They're sexy because and they wear sexy clothes, they wear revealing clothes, but they wear revealing clothes because they want to.
Yeah.
Not because
somebody put them in it.
Somebody made them because they want them to be in their underpants, which is what Harley's in the previous film. So, yeah.
Good.
Birds of Prey, go see it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess that's it. I guess that's a ThunderQuack.
That's a ThunderQuack. We did what we said we would do. We talked about Birds of Prey. We went to see the movie and then we talked about it.
Yep. We did do that. So
yay us.
We'll be back next week, and I actually don't know. I don't know what we're going to talk about next week. I don't have anything. We don't have anything planned.
I don't know.
So
we'll figure it out.
This is one of those things that actually people on Patreon are going to get the opportunity to suggest topics to us. So that's another reason to be over on Patreon, patreon.com/ThunderQuack. But everything at ThunderQuack is changing right now. So we're in the middle of a huge changeover, like I said at the beginning, with the ad-supported stuff. But we're moving all of the podcasts to ThunderQuack.com. So you won't have to go to all of these different places in order to find links to subscribe or to the social media or whatever. It is all going to live under ThunderQuack.com by the end of 2020. It's going to be a long process. There's a lot of podcasts, a lot of episodes, but we are going to be working on that little by little and getting everything over into ThunderQuack.com. And my hope is that by the end of the year, we also are doing different kinds of content on ThunderQuack, not just podcasts, but also some written content, and maybe getting back into the video stuff towards the end of the year. We're kind of taking a break from that right now, just to deal with all of this changeover stuff. But head to thunderquack.com to check out all the other great podcasts in the network, and you can follow us on social media. I haven't changed anything over yet. I was going to. So Instagram.com/ThunderQuack. I believe it's at ThunderQuack on Instagram. And then on Facebook, it's facebook.com/ is it /ThunderQuack? I think it might be.
Podcast. I thought ThunderQuack.
It might be ThunderQuack Podcast. And then on Twitter right now, we are ThunderQuackNet. But I am going to change it to ThunderQuack Pod. So,
that it's all the same.
If you
everywhere.
don't, just like in every instance, just search ThunderQuack Podcast.
Yeah.
And you'll find it. But so we're kind of still in the middle of transitioning all of that stuff. But
thanks for bearing with us while we do so.
Yeah.
And again, let us know what you want us to actually talk about. Like there's lots of things that we could talk about.
Yeah. For sure.
Where
can people find you on social media?
If you want to find me on social media, you can follow me at Akonkin, AKONKIN. That's Twitter. On Instagram, I'm Akonkin86.
And I'm at Arkwolf, ARKWULF on Twitter and Instagram. And if you like what you hear, you can support us in two ways. First, by going to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some merch. And then by heading to patreon.com/ThunderQuack, as we've talked about plenty in this episode, to kick in with your monthly pledge of support and get the podcast ad free, get it early, and get the extended uncut version, where we talk about bowling, where we talk about Jurassic Park, kind of tangentially, and a few other things. But that's it for this episode. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.